afternoon, everybody. Hope you've all had good lunch, and welcome all my, colleagues on the August panel. Thank you so much for joining. First of all, thanks, Mr. Raghu, for making this panel inclusive. Looking at the topic of discussion today, DEI and alignment with corporate governance. So we thought that we should first have our panel becoming very inclusive to have the right kind of diverse perspectives that we want to talk about. As you all know, DEI has become a very significant, part of the corporate governance that we are all responsible for as GCs. We definitely need different perspectives. Organizations are moving towards becoming more and more inclusive. We are adopting new ways of working post-COVID. So there are different scenarios that all of us face. As we all know, there are a lot of anti-discrimination laws in India, looking at, the social laws as well. It is imperative for a general counsel to definitely bring in, not only from a legal perspective, but, all practical aspects of how the cultures are evolving, and as we are all either on the boards or work closely with the boards and the management, it is very imperative and very relevant for all of us to delve deep into how we give the right kind of practical advice to the management onto the board. So I'll start with you, Manjaree. You work very close with the boards. You're also work very closely with the management across different organizations. What do you think, the board should know effectively about DEI? How have you brought in those aspects where, you have to make the environment more inclusive and align the policies and procedures and practices in the organization more and more inclusive? So your views on how effectively, the legal team can work towards the increasing ESG and the DEI aspects that we need to take care of.
Thank you, Pooja, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's always a pleasure to be at an event that BW Legal World organizes. This was a very interesting panel, and we were told about it late evening yesterday. And I was quite surprised that earlier we were only women who were on this panel. So I said that we need to get inclusion to start with on the panel. And therefore you see our very good senior colleague, Raghu, who we've known for a long time, and I'm sure he's going to add the right value. See, on the topic, this topic, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a very oft-spoken subject, but I think is very important and needs to be viewed in its seriousness. It is becoming more important now because sometimes, it takes laws to get us to become very serious about certain things. All in the new ESG, regulation and the requirement in the BSR-SR reporting, you find that there is going to be a, focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is just not going to be a tick in the box. The regulator, your customers, your investors, your employees also, and other stakeholders are all looking at, they're all looking at it very, very carefully, and there is going to be greater focus on this. Organizations are waking up to that reality faster because it requires you to put it into the report now, so it's even more important. It is not, you have to provide proof of that. It is not only about saying that, okay, we've got so many women. What policies do you have around that? You can have a policy on non-discrimination, but, next is going to be, how strong is that policy? Is it actually impacting the organization in the positive way or not? Are you looking, what is the ratio of people of diverse population that you have in the organization? And that diversity, we all understand sometimes only by way of gender diversity. It's not only that. You start there, but there is diversity in all its forms. which is, you could have specially abled people, you could have, I was very intrigued when, about a month ago, I was invited to E&Y, and I went to their office, in the new office in Gurgaon, and they have specially abled, housekeeping staff. So the people who serve you are all can't speak, are dumb, and they were just so smart. And the way the E&Y teams were including them into the mainstream, it was fascinating to watch. So you need those kind of examples. It's not only about a percentage or a kind of, a tick in the box. So from a general counsel's perspective, you got to support the organization in terms of the policies and procedures. That's one thing. The policy and procedure is about getting invited to the dance. Whether you are invited on to the dance floor is how those policies and procedures are actually implemented, which actually brings you to the next part, which is inclusion. Are you really included? There can be a policy on non-discrimination, but there is still discrimination. There is a policy on non-harassment, but there is still a subtle harassment. There could be a policy of inclusion, but there are what we call micro inequities, and it is there across the board. Until you do trainings on those, and people make you aware of them, you don't realize yourself that you could be victims of those, and maybe you are the ones who are propagating it also across the board. So I think it is now a time where policies and procedures, I think all lawyers are cognizant of that. They support their organizations in putting it into place. They review them to ensure it meets with the law. Now next step needs to get taken where the management and the board needs to become extremely cognizant of this.
And aware of what could be the consequences if they are not practiced.
Yes. They also need to understand that, there could be, and the consequences, sometimes are also driven by regulation. When next year you will realize that last year was the first year of reporting on ESG, this is going to be the second. By the time the third and the fourth reports start coming, there will be audits also. And the framework will become more stringent, and therefore the teams and the organizations will also have to become more cognizant that it is not only about having it, but implementing it and showing practical examples by way of illustrations and demonstration that the DE&I is being made a part of the organization.
Thanks, Manjaree. And because these are very relevant points, it's not only about helping in drafting the policies or bringing a legal viewpoint. An active role by the General Counsel and the legal teams, why it is more effective is that if it comes from a legal team, right, this is how we can help change the mindset. People do take it seriously of, what could be, the consequences of not practicing those policies, not only, legal or regulatory consequences, there could be reputational aspects also that management and boards need to take care of. Because more and more we are a part of, global organizations. And not only that, I mean, the scenarios is changing across for all organizations. If you don't progress with that kind of a mindset to become more inclusive, and it definitely is going beyond gender. So it is not just restricted to the female gender. You have all sorts of diversities existing in the system. And recently, in fact, I also lead DIB for my organization. And, I heard that bringing in neurodiverse candidates into the system is the most difficult. And it so happened, not going into the details, coincidentally, that when we began our PWD journey, the very first few candidates that we've onboarded are neurodiverse candidates. So looking into all the legal aspects of, how to onboard them into the ecosystem and make it very inclusive for them and also for the people who are already existing in the system. It's not only legal, I mean, a lot of, Manjaree, as you said, a lot of sensitization programs in the organization to have it ready and to create that kind of an enabling environment that, those people also thrive in the organization. So, Roop, if you could throw light on, we know a lot of anti-discrimination laws, anti-harassment laws that are there in place. How could the general councils, bring in that perspective to the management and the board, that it's not just about laws? How do you go beyond it? And how do you go beyond gender? As I said, that it's not related to just or restricted to just being, taking care of gender representation from a female perspective, but just expanding the definition of diversity beyond. We have people from the LGBTQI plus community. We have specially able people in the system. And also in the new ways of working, a lot of situations are evolving where people would want to work from different locations. How do you take care of the equal opportunity policies? So if you could just speak about that from your perspective.
Thank you, Pooja, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, it's a very important subject that has been touched upon by this panel, and as far as bringing in more equity, more diversity is concerned across the gender, I think, first of all, as a general counsel, we are conditioned to be more equitable. So we should have the courage to say the right thing before the board. And it is not only that we get the board aligned with us as far as equity is concerned, across genders, across LGBTQ and all, but even other things, you have to get the board aligned. And it's not only that you get the board aligned, but you have to sensitize the larger employee base so that they become more sensitized. Recently, just around, I think, 2-3 months back, we onboarded employees from LGBTQ community, and we obviously held some trainings for the employees so that they are more sensitive towards that part of the community, and they are more, as far as the communication is concerned, there's no discrimination, there's no eyebrows raised. So we conducted those trainings before onboarding LGBTQ community people into our employee base. And over and above that, I don't think it is like a one-time sensitization program. It has to be a consistent monitoring and assurance program. So you sensitize and then you monitor. And then you can bring about a mindset as well as the behavior change. It's more to do with inclusivity in employees' minds. So that part you have to drive. As general counsel, you assist various functions to drive that. They come back to you for advices. The HR, general counsel function closely works with the HR to drive these changes. And I'm also a part of DEI committee in the company. So we drive a lot of policies around equal opportunity. So I think COVID has taught us that location is immaterial. Of course, you have to be business facing, but at the same time, if there are people or employees, but the talent is there and they have locational constraints, how we can include them. So we need to be, we are not there, it's still a journey, and but we are looking at policies where we become more inclusive as far as geographical locations are concerned. And otherwise, differently abled people, we've employed some differently abled people as well, and having, I think there's a regulatory norm that you need to have an advisor for them. So having a proper advisor, investing in that advisor, having employee on board to kind of, if they can go and discuss their grievances with them. So these kind of investments companies have started making. They have become more sensitized. They want to be more inclusive, and they want to obviously drive more inclusivity. So that's all.
Yes, Manjaree.
Just a thought that was coming to my mind on this topic. When we talk of how do we run this? And, you know, I go back to my G days because I used to lead G Women's Network in India for them. And, you know, why that program went well and why it was really served the purpose for what it was set out was because there was a, you know, mandate for it and the correct intent about it right at the chairman's level, right at the chairman of G's level. And from there it was run like a P&L. You know, sometimes all these initiatives, we run them by the way, you know. So somebody, in addition to their everyday job, you know, please look at it a little. There's no monitoring about it. There's no budgets around it. There is nobody, you know, the way you monitor your sales numbers. If you monitor these initiatives in that manner, and there is a, you know, mandate for it, not only at the board, at the chairman, at down below at the senior management level, and then percolating down. And that can only happen when it is run like a P&L and there is a dedicated sort of a fixed goals and objectives put on for it. And therefore, it gives it that necessary that this is another pillar of the company that we have to take forward. And I saw it flourish simply because it was run in this manner. And sometimes the intent is very good in other times I've seen, but it doesn't go forward just because there is no, there's no structure to it, and it's not monitored, and there is no sort of focus of the, you know, senior management on it.
No, very well said, Manjaree. In fact, what can't be measured can't be done is so relevant. And, you know, all programs that you undertake to make your organization more equitable, inclusive, if there's no governance around it, no structure, no committees to, you know, provide oversight on how are you, you know, what are the metrics, how are you measuring on them, and how are you performing, then unfortunately, you know, because this is over and beyond of our day jobs, of whosoever does it. If they're only, you know, run in a very siloed manner, you know, with a few people who are expected to lead it, that's not going to bring in the results that the organization wants. It has to be championed across teams. It has to definitely start from the top and percolate down to all levels and kind of have a sandwich situation where everybody is working towards, you know, and is aligned towards making the environment really inclusive. Ms. Raghu, coming to you, you know, what will be some of, we've had different perspectives on how, you know, DEI is aligned and embedded into corporate governance and the advisories that we give and the, you know, the areas of focus that we have. I would want you to throw some light on, do you see that there are, you know, in a practical aspect, if we see, there are any challenges that we encounter with the management and with the boards that we work with in, you know, really effectively practicing some of these things?
Thanks, Pooja. Thanks for including me in this panel. I think everything that Manjaree, Roop, and you said are relevant. They have to be done, policies. But, you know, there's a letter and there's a spirit. And I've had the good fortune or the misfortune of working 50% of my career with large multinationals and 50% with Indian promoters. And this is with no malice to either side. There is optics and there's reality, okay? All that we are talking about, when we hire a person, do we look at the talent of the person, or we go by it's a male, female, LGBT, what, you know, there are so many criteria that happen. And today if you look at, while there's a mandate for listed entities to have at least one women director, people have just ticked the box. Show me one board of any large company where there are 5 women in the board, except I guess maybe it will be ICICI, which, because Mr. Kamath always believed that women should come to the top. But we are still at a very nascent stage of inclusiveness and diversity. And if I'm being contrarian, please don't kill me for this, but that's reality. And people don't understand, what people don't understand is the huge advantage that you have when you have an inclusive and a diverse population. I have had the good fortune, in fact, in my last stint also, I used to always say that my department had 70% women and 30% were men, you know, and I ran with them for 8-9 years, and we did some of the largest transactions. The question is that you have to treat people based on the merit that they bring to the table. You don't, these committees and all this, these are optics. There has to be intent, and I fully endorse what Manjaree said, that tone from the top. You have to, when BSR, I have seen the template, it asks you for what's your diversity ratio, okay? What's your male-female ratio or all of that. You can take at a lower job level, you can take 50-70% women, but you don't allow people to come up to the top levels. It's actually, at some stage, even SEBI will look at all the data. It's only the second year, third year, and I've had conversations with the directors at SEBI on this topic. They are just collating data at this point in time. They'll come down quite heavy with, when self-regulation fails, regulations will come. And that has been the trend around the world. If we want to tick the box and try to demonstrate that we are doing this, we are doing that, it will not help. At the end of the day, in a growing economy, this is the only way that you can do. 50% of your population is female. I'm just taking a ballpark, 50% men and 50%, maybe the ratio will be 2 or 3% here and there. And if you, in the offices you walk in, you will not find that. Yes, in the factories you'll find that. So there is white collar, blue collar, and all the various things. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is that when you actually work with diverse people, and trust you me, I've had the fortune of having male bosses, female bosses constantly, and large teams where women were there. The kind of perspective that comes for the business, the kind of safety norms. I remember many years back when we were talking about cabs for all the call centers to Gurgaon. And we were the first ones who actually set up a standard which subsequently we filed it with the High Court Delhi, and that became the norm of how cabs have to be used when female colleagues are getting dropped. You know, small little things that have to be done in depth, and you have to believe in letter and spirit. You cannot say that SEBI wants this, I will do this. Somebody else wants it, I will do this. You know, even, and this is the much hyped discussion, but I think we are still at a very nascent stage, very nascent. And I would urge everyone who's sitting in the room, if there is one takeaway, please try it out. Even if you don't believe, please try it out to have a diverse and inclusive team, and you see the impact of that. You'll realize yourself that it's far better to have a diverse team than to just have either a female-dominated team or a male-dominated. Have people, and people specially abled as well. You know, and as you were mentioning about E&Y, in AMETS, the earlier days used to have this room which would all, you know, all the male sorting and all that. All that used to be done by people who are specially abled. Because as a policy, the company said, we will not take anybody else other than specially abled people. Because there was no time urgency, they had to sort, they will sort it out, and they'll do it. Because you have to, and this is tone at the top. On the multinational side, I think the message comes from the top, so that they are maybe a notches higher. But at the end of the day, we all come from the same community. And we have that tendency to pull that back any amount. So somewhere we have to push it, and that's the only way. You don't have a second choice.
Mr. Raghu, and very, very good perspective. And I mean, it has to be practiced in letter and spirit, because, you know, we still have a long way to go. If, you know, even if there's representation, till the time there is equal representation or moving towards equity, what's going to happen is that, you know, the representation, till the time it is in minority, it is very difficult for those people to share their perspective. So all the more work required to, you know, to be creating an environment where everybody can speak up, share their perspectives, because it's just not getting in those people, it's also making the environment inclusive in real sense, so that everybody can bring in and share their perspective, talk about what they are feeling. I'll share a very relevant insight that we did an inclusion survey last year, and we had all our, DEI multi-year plans of onboarding people from, the PWD community, especially able people, and people from the LGBTQ community, and we were working towards that. And the results of the survey come in, and to the extent that I can share, we were, quite positively surprised to see that there are already people in the system existing from the LGBTQ community, and who are specially abled as well. And we were thinking that we have to onboard, but there are people already existing in the system, and then we started working backwards to create an enabling environment so that those people can come in and, share what their real identity is. So there's a lot of work in creating that sort of environment. Sometimes we think that we have to onboard people, but it's more about how you are working with the environment, and there are people, maybe there's somebody who's suffering from mental health challenges, they are not speaking about it. So a lot of work needs to be done, and it definitely, the tone that you set from the top really matters. People have to see across that there's intent and there's real willingness in bringing that kind of change.
If I may,
Yeah, sure.
30 seconds. I've seen a lot of boards where there are women. Okay?
Yeah.
We are just oblivious of the fact that there are people from other genders who are there.
Yes.
The kind of conversation that happens, it's absolutely obnoxious, to say the least. We will not do that conversation when we are overseas, because overseas, the equality rights, the women there will stop you from doing that. But we are very oblivious of that. The second other element is that as general counsels, and this is my humble request to all JCs, you are the influencers, not just a lawyer. You have access to the senior most people in the system. The chairman speaks to you practically on a daily basis. The vice chairman speaks, the senior leadership speaks. You are supposed to be the influencer, and you are supposed to really push this agenda, because you are doing something, you are doing a human service to that organization in the long run. If you don't do that, you are failing in your responsibility.
Just to add to what Raghu was saying, I think, as lawyers, we have to push the agenda of diversity, equity and inclusion. That's fine. But I think in our own perspectives also, diversity is one. Try and get as diverse a slate as you can in terms of your own, teams and organizations. But also be very mindful of equity and inclusion. In the whole process of looking for diversity, we forget that the other two parts of it, which is equity and inclusion, is far more important. Because you can hire somebody, that person can be a disabled person or especially abled or LGBTQ or a female staff. But if you're not going to give them an equal standing and hear them, they are not going to flourish, and they are not going to be able to stand up and and come into their own. Oftentimes we see equity is that, are you hearing everybody on your team? Sometimes we don't. Inclusion. I can give you, G did some very nice things for us, and shortly before I left them, we had a training for 3 hours, which was done through some guy who'd come from Harvard, but it was an online training. He told us about these things, about these micro inequities, and it's a great example that I'd like to share. He said, think about, in the morning, you are a senior, you're the general counsel, you're walking down to your office and you are passing by your team. The team is eager, you're the boss, everyone looks up and tries to say good morning to you, this, that. And you are in your own thought, you are not doing anything wrong, the intent is absolutely right. And 4 people have wished you, you look at one person, smile and say good morning, and just walk past. And you have not said anything or acknowledged the greeting of any of the others. Now what happens? You go and get on with your work. But those the one that got acknowledged feels that, wow, my boss looked at me, remembered my name, and even acknowledged my greeting. Whereas the other three, the whole day is ruined because they spend the better part of their day thinking, what did I do wrong? Maybe she's not happy with me. Maybe he's not looking. Why did I sense something which is not good? This is this. Look at the loss of productivity and the lack of motivation that happens. And this is these. I really felt woken up when I went through this training, because inadvertently we end up doing these kind of things. I'm not saying we do it advertently, but inadvertently also. So I think why I shared it is because somewhere I think if it can ring a bell with all of you, and maybe even a certain percentage of the time you're conscious of it, I'm sure it will go a long way to build more equity and more inclusion in your teams and in the environment around you.
Thanks, Priyanka. No, very relevant, perspectives shared. That, in fact, since as you said, Mr. Raghu, that we are in positions of influence and we should use it positively. Unconscious bias, we cannot just do away with it. That's going to exist. But if we can influence and work with different teams, with HR and compliance, to make to making people aware of what unconscious bias is, that's also very relevant, because the more awareness we have, the more people are going to think about it and be consciously taking some actions that we should be. Then another also a very relevant point is that we get to work on a lot of policies. We should always keep in mind how we can make those policies gender agnostic, more inclusive, because it's a change that we can bring in the organizations. And how do we just go beyond organizations to take those changes back home? If your policies are gender agnostic and you are enabling all genders, change is going to happen back home as well, which is then going to bring in the right societal level changes that we want to make the environment really inclusive. So anybody wants to share any perspective of how any of your organizations have worked in this space?
Before we go there, one last point. Have the courage of conviction. If you believe in this, stand up to it. Say that. There'll be a lot of resistance, but please stand up to the cause. You will be the harbinger of this change. And that's a request to every GC, because you all are not only thought leaders, you are the leaders who are looked up to in the organization. You are role models. So it's up to you how you want to carve that role model.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, thank you. And you're leading from your question, Mr. Raghu, that Manjaree, you spoke about it. What you said is a perfect example of developing a sense of belonging in people. If you go beyond DEI now, it's also the inclusion of B, which is belonging, on how people, as an effort of DEI measures, feel. Are they effectively landing with people? So a lot of work is now done on belonging. And I would just come back to each one of you, if you could share some personal examples or something that has happened in your team or personally in your space that has motivated you enough to aligning DEI with whatever you do, and creating a sense of belonging in your teams and in the organizations that you work with. Any examples that you want to share?
Thank you, Pooja, and thank you, Manjaree, for bringing out a very basic but very relevant example. And that actually happened with me lot of times when, in my growing up years during the corporate ladder, when I was climbing the corporate ladder, many times I felt very ignored. Okay, you are being very courteous to your boss, and maybe subconsciously he or she is kind of not reciprocating, and this brings down the productivity. I've gone through it myself. So obviously I've inculcated this in my DNA, that with my team I have to be very pleasant, I have to be very inclusive and very unbiased. Perfection may not be there, I'll be very honest, but every day you have to work towards being perfect. So because all your team members, they need to feel included, they need to feel that there's an unbiased attitude towards you, because if you're saying like there are 5 different people saying good morning to you and you're just responding to one and others, you're subconsciously excluding the others. And it really, really brings down your productivity, at least for that day. And if it is not addressed, then it just pents up. You know, it pents up, and you're a human being and you have emotions, and it pents up and it keeps growing. So, and to that, I would say you should speak up, and the bosses should listen up. So I think it's not only speak up, I think we perpetuate speak up a lot. It is also listen up. So we should be perpetuating listen up as well. Thank you.
Pooja, to this question, it's a tough one actually, and I think all of us have been through, and it could be gender agnostic also. I think as we start our careers, whether we are men or women, we do get sidelined, and people not listen to us, and you got to fight your way through and get, and as women, perhaps the days when we started, I think there was a little more of that. But then, I started my corporate career also with law firms, and it was a little bit of, I could sense that there was a little disparity. But then I walked into a company like GE, and that really opened my eyes. I think maybe people who worked in GE, some of them may have had different experiences, but I can only vouch for my own, which was one of great inclusion. Amazing amount of inclusion. I was, the fact that when I joined them, I was only about 4.5, 5 years of legal experience. But before that, I was a professor where I taught for almost 7 years. They actually took my previous experience into consideration when they gave me my designation as an assistant vice president. And that was the first step of being recognized and being included. And suddenly you wanted to give back to that company who's looking upon you and taking your experience into consideration. And throughout my 18 years or 17 years with them, I continued at every level to see that, I never got sidelined just because I was a diverse person or otherwise. It was all about your capability, what you could bring to the table. If you could do it better than your counterpart, you were given the role to and the job to do it. And I think that, and alongside that, I also used to lead the women's network. So I think that got cemented into my thinking and my psyche. And I think when I walked into Maruti, of course, I was the only diverse candidate, so to speak, at their management level. But, and there were inequities, and very unconscious also. I think they don't even realize. But the fact was that how did I continue is because of what I had learnt. And what I had learnt, I put it across with a sense of professionalism and with a sense of perseverance to show that, I can do the job as well. And gradually, that acceptance began happening. I think we are at that stage now where we've just put up our first line, which is all manned by women. So for a company that was only having men at the shop floor, that's a big step for a company like Maruti. And I think that's a good start, and which is going to get taken forward.
No examples. I can go on and on giving you as many examples as you want, which we can do in trophy time. But I think all of us need to know the fact that, let me just compliment, the General Counsel world. If today you look at the General Counsel world, it's the diverse and inclusiveness is very visible. You can see there are so many women who are heading, and equal number of men are also heading General Counsel, and the team's also building up. So in the General Counsel world, I don't think we'll struggle, but we must play our role in influencing and in bringing about that change. And there's only one direction. If you don't do that, you are behind. The reason why GE or American Express, all these American companies, they are not doing this for charity. They believe in it, they have struggled. They have had their pitfalls much before, and they are all 100, 150 years old companies. So therefore, their evolution has taught them that this is the only way. And if we can learn from those organizations, it's only better for us as India grows into the 5 trillion or 20 trillion economy, right? Thanks.
There are statistics and data that prove that there are better results, there's better innovation in companies that are diverse. I'll just close on this note that, I haven't really seen communities focused on women in law, particularly, as is required for women in tech. So really proud, that in the legal community, at least we have, equal representation, and we've been inclusive. So if we have that, why not spread it across? And as you said, that we can be influencers. We have the, you have one question? Okay. So, let's put all our efforts to align the DI measures with whatever we do. Yes.